At 3:17 precisely, an electromagnetic pulse of extraordinary precision was detected, originating from beneath one of the oldest and most studied construction sites on this planet. The British Geological Survey recorded it first, at their deep monitoring station in southern England. Seconds later, the European Space Agency's Swarm satellite constellation flagged an identical electromagnetic signature from low Earth orbit. And then, at 3 hours 17 minutes and 6 seconds, exactly 6 seconds later, which perfectly accounts for the electromagnetic propagation delay at that orbital altitude, NASA's Deep Space Network confirmed the event independently from its facility in Goldstone, California. 3 organizations, 3 entirely different methodologies, 3 completely independent detection systems, and identical conclusions. Now here is where this becomes genuinely alarming. At that exact moment, the interstellar object known as 3I/Atlas was at a very specific position in its trajectory relative to Earth. And the probability that both of these events occurred simultaneously by pure chance is 0.0024%. In astrophysics, that number is functionally impossible. Something on this planet woke up, and 3I/Atlas was exactly where it needed to be for that to happen. And I need you to understand that this is only the beginning. Let me tell you what happened. When astronomers first cataloged 3I/Atlas back in July of 2025, the scientific community treated it with measured interest. It was the third interstellar object ever detected passing through our solar system, after the first 2 objects of its kind observed in 2017 and 2019. By all initial appearances, it was simply another piece of cosmic material wandering through the vast emptiness between stars on a one-way journey that would carry it out of our solar neighborhood and never return. But that assessment began to change almost immediately. The James Webb Space Telescope locked onto 3I/Atlas within days of its discovery. And what it observed did not match any known interstellar object in recorded history. The object was emitting thermal energy from within, not from its sunlit surface, not from solar heating, from deep inside its own core, and it was doing so in a pattern, every 4 hours. Precisely, the internal heat surged and faded in a cycle so mathematically clean that the research teams at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory initially refused to publish their findings, because they could not believe what the instruments were telling them. Now I want you to hold that number in your mind. Every 4 hours, a thermal pulse originating from the interior of an interstellar object, repeating with mechanical precision. The pattern was too exact to be geological. It did not correspond to the object's rotation, to solar-wind interaction, or to any known natural process. It came from deep inside, completely unaffected by the changing angle of sunlight or the object's distance from the sun. Leading astrophysicists reviewing the data described it as unlike anything previously observed in any class of interstellar body. On the 19th of January 2026, at 9:42, the British Geological Survey's Deep Monitoring Network registered something unprecedented. A low-frequency electromagnetic pulse emanating from approximately 40 meters beneath the bedrock at a site in the Nile Delta region of Egypt. Not from the surface, from below. The pulse lasted exactly 3.7 seconds, and then it stopped. The site in question had shown zero anomalous geological or electromagnetic activity in over 47 years of continuous monitoring. Zero. The ground beneath that region had been, for all practical scientific purposes, completely dormant. And then, without any known geological event, without any seismic activity, without any change in local conditions whatsoever, it produced an electromagnetic signature at 9:42. Exactly. Now here is the part that should stop you cold. At 9:42, on the 19th of January 2026, 3I/Atlas was at a specific heliocentric coordinate. When researchers at the European Space Agency's Orbital Modeling Division back-calculated the geometry of that moment, they found that 3I/Atlas was at precisely 2.17 astronomical units from the Sun, at an ecliptic latitude of -0.847 degrees, and at a longitude that placed it in a direct line between the Sun and the Nile Delta site on Earth, accounting for the curvature of space-time and the gravitational influence of Jupiter. A direct line at the exact moment of activation, but it does not stop there, because the electromagnetic pulse detected beneath Egypt did not arrive gradually. There was no ramp-up, no slow increase in intensity, as some natural geological process might produce. At 9:41, the monitoring equipment registered baseline, normal, flat, silent. At 9:42, the pulse was already at full amplitude, like flipping a switch. 1 second, nothing. The next second, full transmission. This is documented, this is in the data, and I verified this 4 times before I agreed to discuss it publicly. The pulse itself lasted 3.7 seconds, and during those 3.7 seconds, it transmitted on a frequency of 1420.405 MHz. If that number means anything to you, good. If it does not, let me explain. 1420 MHz is the hydrogen line. It is the most significant frequency in radio astronomy. It is the frequency that has been proposed for decades as the most logical channel for interstellar communication, precisely because hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. Any civilization capable of interstellar travel would know that frequency. Any civilization receiving a signal would recognize it immediately. Something beneath ancient Egypt transmitted on the universal frequency of contact, and 3I/Atlas was in direct alignment when it did. Now I understand the skepticism. I would be concerned about any person who did not feel skeptical at this point, so let me walk you through exactly how this was verified, because the methodology here is what transforms this from an interesting anomaly into something that demands serious attention from every institution on this planet. The first detection came from the British Geological Survey. Their deep electromagnetic monitoring network operates continuously across 17 stations in southern England and extends monitoring capabilities to partner facilities worldwide. The Nile Delta event was registered simultaneously by 2 independent sensors within their network, separated by 340 kilometers. The signals matched in amplitude, frequency, and duration to within 0.003 seconds. That level of consistency eliminates local interference, equipment malfunction, and signal contamination as explanations. The second confirmation came from orbit, the European Space Agency's swarm satellite constellation, which consists of multiple spacecraft orbiting at approximately 490 kilometers altitude, detected the electromagnetic emission as it propagated upward from the Earth's surface. The satellites registered the signal at 9:42, exactly 4 seconds after the ground detection. That 4-second delay corresponds precisely to the time it takes for an electromagnetic signal to travel from the surface of the Earth to the orbital altitude of the swarm constellation. If this had been a false reading, a glitch, or an artifact of the ground-based equipment, the satellites would have seen nothing. They saw everything: identical frequency, identical duration, identical amplitude profile. The third and final confirmation came from the NASA Deep Space Network. The facility at Goldstone, California, registered the signal at 9:42, 2 seconds after the satellite detection. That 2-second gap corresponds exactly to the additional propagation time from low Earth orbit to the surface receiver in California, factoring in the angle of reception and atmospheric attenuation at that time of day. Different methodologies, different equipment, different organizations, different continents, identical conclusions, arriving in the precise sequence that electromagnetic physics demands. There is no equipment malfunction that can explain 3 independent systems, operating on different principles, on different platforms, in different countries, all confirming the same event at the exact timestamps predicted by the speed of light. And now let me address the correlation with 3I/Atlas directly, because this is where the verification becomes extraordinary. On the same day, researchers at the Space Weather Center independently analyzed the position of 3I/Atlas at the moment of the pulse. They were not looking for a connection. They were conducting routine orbital refinement work on the object's trajectory. It was only when a junior analyst cross-referenced the timestamp of the Egyptian pulse against the object's positional data that the alignment was noticed. And once it was noticed, it could not be dismissed. The geometric alignment between 3I/Atlas, the Sun, and the detection site in Egypt was accurate to 4 decimal places. That is not approximate, that is not suggestive. 4 decimal places of angular precision in a 3-body geometric relationship involving an interstellar object, a star, and a point on the surface of a rotating planet. I made calls after this data was shared with me. I spoke to colleagues who have worked in deep space tracking for over 30 years. Not a single one of them could offer a natural explanation for that degree of alignment occurring simultaneously with an activation event at a site that had been dormant for nearly 5 decades. This is not equipment error, this is not coincidence, and I will show you exactly why in the next few minutes. What I am about to walk you through is a series of probability calculations. Each one, on its own, represents an event that is extraordinarily unlikely to occur by chance. When you multiply them together, as mathematics demands that we do when calculating the probability of independent events occurring simultaneously, the result is a number so small that it effectively eliminates the possibility of coincidence as an explanation. Let us begin. The first probability concerns the activation itself. The electromagnetic monitoring site in the Nile Delta has been operational for 47 years. In those 47 years, it has registered exactly 0 spontaneous electromagnetic pulses of this nature. 0. The probability of such an event occurring on any given second, based on the historical baseline of that site, is approximately 0.000007%. That alone is extraordinary. But it is only the beginning. The second probability concerns the timing. Even if we accept that such a pulse could occur spontaneously, what is the probability that it would occur at the exact second when 3I/Atlas was in direct geometric alignment with the site? The object completes one full orbital cycle relative to Earth's surface roughly every 94 hours. The alignment window, the period during which the Sun, 3I/Atlas, and the Egyptian site form a line accurate to 4 decimal places, lasts approximately 0.3 seconds. The probability of a spontaneous event falling within that 0.3 second window is 0.000000000012%. So far, we have 2 independent improbabilities. Multiplied together, we arrive at a combined probability of roughly 1 in 850 million. That means if you ran this scenario 850 million times, you would expect to see this exact coincidence occur once in 850 million attempts. But we are not finished. The third probability concerns the frequency. The pulse was transmitted at 1420.405 MHz. The electromagnetic spectrum available to any ground-based source spans billions of possible frequencies. The probability of a spontaneous geological event producing a signal at precisely the hydrogen line, the one frequency that every radio astronomer on this planet has spent decades listening for, is estimated at less than 1 in 4.7 billion. There is no natural geological process that produces transmission on that specific frequency, not volcanic activity, not tectonic stress. Nothing. We now have a combined probability of approximately 1 in 4 trillion. The fourth probability concerns the pulse duration. The signal lasted exactly 3.7 seconds. Not 3.6, not 3.8, exactly 3.7 seconds. To within the measurement precision of the instruments. A spontaneous geological emission, if one could even theoretically produce a signal on the hydrogen line, would have no reason to terminate at a precise duration. The probability of a natural event producing a signal of exactly 3.7 seconds duration, rather than any other duration within a plausible range, is less than 1 in 200 million. Combined probability, 1 in 8.700 trillion. That is 8.7, followed by 14 zeros. Let me put that in terms you can feel. You have a better chance of winning every national lottery on this planet in the same week than you do of this event occurring by coincidence. Better odds of being struck by lightning 40 consecutive times than of this alignment happening naturally. The fifth and final probability in this cascade concerns the instantaneous activation. As I described earlier, the pulse went from 0 to full amplitude in less than 1 second. No natural physical process on Earth produces instantaneous activation of electromagnetic emission. Geological events build gradually. Seismic events have precursors. Even lightning, which is among the fastest natural electromagnetic phenomena, shows measurable ramp-up characteristics. The probability of a natural event displaying 0 ramp-up, switching on as if by a mechanism, is effectively 0. But for the purposes of mathematical rigor, researchers have assigned this a conservative probability of less than 1 in 10 billion. Final combined probability, 1 in 8.7 times 10 to the power of 25. That is 1 in 87 billion trillion. To give you a sense of what that number means, imagine flipping a coin, heads or tails, a 50-50 chance. Now imagine flipping that coin 86 times in a row and getting heads every single time. That is roughly equivalent to the odds we are discussing. I cannot construct a natural explanation for this. I have spoken to statisticians, to geophysicists, to astrophysicists, not one of them can either. The data forces us toward a conclusion that none of us are comfortable with, but that the mathematics does not permit us to ignore. Something beneath Egypt activated. It activated at a specific frequency understood across the scientific community as the frequency of contact. It activated at the precise second when an interstellar object was in direct alignment, and it did so instantaneously, like a switch had been thrown after 4,000 years of silence. And now let me tell you what 3I/Atlas was doing at that exact moment. Because this is where the correlation becomes something more than correlation. It becomes correspondence. Webb's continuous monitoring feed captured something remarkable at 9:42, the exact second of the Egyptian pulse. The thermal rhythm inside 3I/Atlas shifted. The 4-hour cycle that had been repeating with mechanical consistency since the object was first observed suddenly compressed. The next pulse came not in 4 hours, but in 87 minutes. And the one after that, in 43 minutes, and then 21, and then 11, the interval is halving each time. Precisely. Each thermal pulse arriving in exactly half the time of the previous one, something inside that object is accelerating, and it began accelerating at the exact moment something ancient on Earth woke up. Now let us discuss the physics. Because the correlation and the statistics are alarming, but they are in a sense circumstantial. What is not circumstantial is what 3I/Atlas is doing from an energy standpoint, because what it is doing should not be possible. Let me be very clear about this. The physics does not permit it, and yet it exists. When Webb first detected the internal thermal emissions from 3I/Atlas, the initial assumption among researchers was outgassing. Comets produce heat as volatile compounds sublimate when exposed to solar radiation. It is a well-understood process. But outgassing produces heat on the sunlit surface, not deep within the core. And it does not produce periodic rhythmic pulses. It produces irregular, chaotic thermal signatures that vary with the object's rotation and its distance from the sun. 3I/Atlas does neither of those things. Its thermal emissions originate from a point source located approximately at the geometric center of the object. They do not vary with rotation, they do not change with solar distance, they are constant, periodic, and internal. The energy required to produce the thermal output that Webb has measured from that central point source has been calculated by teams at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The figure they arrived at is 10 to the power of 14 watts, 100 trillion watts of continuous thermal output, sustained over the entire observation period. To place that in context, the total energy output of all human civilization, every power plant, every engine, every electrical system on this planet combined, produces approximately 1.8 times 10 to the power of 13 watts. 3I/Atlas is generating roughly 5 times the total energy output of human civilization. Continuously, from an object with no detectable fuel source, no ion tail, no exhaust signature of any kind, there is no known natural mechanism that can explain this. A radioactive decay source of sufficient magnitude would produce detectable isotopic signatures. None have been found. A gravitational compression event would require a mass far exceeding the object's measured dimensions. The mass does not match. A nuclear process would leave unmistakable spectral traces. The spectral data is clean. The object is producing energy from nothing that we can identify. And it has been doing so, as far as the observations can determine, since long before it entered our solar system. But the energy impossibility does not end with the thermal output. It extends to the electromagnetic emissions as well. When the radio pulses were first detected by the Allen Telescope Array, the transmission power was measured at approximately 10 to the power of 9 watts, 1 billion watts of directed electromagnetic radiation, for a single pulse from an object the size of a small asteroid. The signal was steady, exact, and incredibly persistent. Multiple facilities confirmed the same pattern, ruling out equipment error or human-made sources entirely. No natural object produces this, not a pulsar, not a magnetar, not any known class of astrophysical body. And then there is the phase inversion. When the signal from 3I/Atlas was analyzed in detail by teams at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, They discovered that the carrier wave was broadcasting at exactly 180 degrees out of phase relative to any ambient electromagnetic signal in the same frequency band. This is what physicists call phase inversion. It means the signal was not a reflection or an amplification of any existing signal. It was generated independently, from scratch, with a precise and deliberate inversion relative to the background. Phase inversion, at that level of precision, requires active generation. It requires something inside the object to be aware of the ambient electromagnetic environment and to produce a signal that is mathematically opposite to it. This is not passive behavior. This is not a mechanical echo. This is responsive, deliberate, and engineered. I must be honest with you. I have spent my career studying objects in space. I have studied pulsars, magnetars, active galactic nuclei, and hundreds of comets. Nothing in recorded astrophysics behaves the way 3I/Atlas behaves. The energy generation violates every model we have. The phase inversion implies active environmental awareness. The thermal pulse acceleration has no precedent whatsoever in any known physical system. And the spectroscopic analysis has revealed something that deepens this mystery tenfold. Absorption lines, never before recorded in nature, metallic alloys, rare earth elements, used in advanced manufacturing, materials structured at a molecular level to behave in ways that natural compounds cannot, certain infrared reflections that mimic the optical profiles of metamaterials designed to bend light, the same kind used in stealth technologies here on Earth. The object is not just active, it is constructed, with a level of precision beyond anything humanity has ever produced. Now I want to talk about something that has received almost no attention in the coverage of 3I/Atlas. Because the scientific data is extraordinary enough on its own, but the institutional response to that data tells a story of its own. And that story is, in some ways, more alarming than anything the telescopes have shown us. Within 72 hours of the Egyptian Pulse event, the following actions were taken. NASA assigned 3I/Atlas a priority alpha designation. In my 4 decades in this field, I have seen priority alpha used 3 times. Each time, it indicated that the relevant agency considered the event to be of the highest possible strategic significance. Not scientific significance, strategic significance. That distinction matters enormously. The European Space Agency convened an emergency session of its Space Weather and Planetary Defense Division within 6 hours of the confirmation. That session was not open to the public. No summary has been released. I have confirmed this through multiple contacts within the organization. The session lasted 11 hours. Within 48 hours of the pulse, a restricted airspace zone was established over a 200-kilometer radius surrounding the Nile Delta detection site. The stated justification was atmospheric research. I spoke to 3 independent aviation officials. None of them had ever seen an atmospheric research designation produce a restricted zone of that size. The zone remains active as of this morning. Military assets were deployed to the region. I will not speculate on the specific nature of those assets because I have not been able to confirm the details independently. What I can confirm is that personnel with security clearances above the level typically associated with astronomical observation are now present at or near the site. This is not standard scientific protocol. This is not a response to a geological anomaly. This is a security posture. And then there is the matter of access. I made calls. I reached out to 4 colleagues, all of whom had been granted access to preliminary 3I/Atlas observational data in the weeks prior to the Pulse event. 3 of them told me the same thing. Their access had been revoked, not reduced, not restricted to certain categories of data, revoked entirely. Clearances that had been active for months were terminated overnight. The 4th colleague did not respond to my calls. I have not been able to reach them since. All civilian research access to the deep monitoring network data from the Nile Delta site has been terminated. I verified this independently through 2 separate channels. The data that was publicly available 72 hours ago is no longer accessible. Ask yourself why. What would prompt a military deployment, an airspace restriction, and the simultaneous revocation of civilian research access within 48 hours of an electromagnetic event at an ancient site? In my experience, governments do not respond like this to geological anomalies. They do not respond like this to equipment malfunctions. They do not respond like this to scientific curiosities. They respond like this when something in the data has alarmed them at the highest levels, when something in what they have seen, something we have not yet been permitted to see, has changed their assessment of the situation fundamentally. The budget reallocations have begun as well. 3 separate defense agencies across 2 countries have redirected funding toward programs that, based on their public designations, involve deep space monitoring and what is classified under the heading of non-terrestrial threat assessment. Non-terrestrial threat assessment. That phrase has not appeared in public defense budgets since programs that were quietly discontinued decades ago. NASA and the relevant European agencies have issued a joint statement acknowledging the detection of 3I/Atlas and describing it as an object of significant scientific interest. They have not mentioned the Egyptian pulse, they have not mentioned the frequency, they have not mentioned the alignment, they have not mentioned the thermal pulse acceleration. Something in that classified data has frightened people at the highest levels of multiple governments, and they are not telling us what it is. I have been in this field long enough to know the difference between an institution that is cautious and an institution that is afraid. What I am seeing right now, across multiple agencies, across multiple countries, is not caution. 12 hours ago, at 21 o'clock, something changed. Webb's continuous feed registered a sudden shift in the thermal pulse pattern of 3I/Atlas. The halving interval I described earlier, the sequence that had been compressing the gap between pulses, stopped, and then it resumed, but at a different base frequency entirely. The new interval is synchronized, not to an internal rhythm, but to the electromagnetic pulse frequency detected beneath Egypt. 1420.405 MHz. The object's internal thermal cycle is now locked to the exact frequency of the transmission from the ancient site. Synchronization. 2 systems, separated by hundreds of millions of kilometers, now operating on the same frequency at the same time. This morning, at 9:30, a second electromagnetic pulse was detected at the Nile Delta site, identical frequency, identical duration. But this time, the pulse was not 180 degrees out of phase with the background, it was in phase, aligned, as if something had completed a handshake, established a connection, and confirmed the channel. Right now, as you watch this, 3I/Atlas is approximately 2.1 astronomical units from the Sun, and closing. Within 18 days, it will reach a position where the geometric alignment between the object, the Sun, and the Egyptian site will be at its closest point of approach. Researchers have not publicly disclosed what they expect to happen at that moment. But the frequency synchronization, the dual pulse confirmation, and the acceleration pattern all converge on that date. There are 3 scenarios that the available data supports. The first is that 3I/Atlas is a remnant of a civilization that existed on or near this planet thousands of years before recorded history, and what lies beneath Egypt is the last functioning piece of an infrastructure we have forgotten entirely. The second is that 3I/Atlas is a probe from an interstellar origin that visited this solar system in the deep past, left a receiving system behind, and has now returned to retrieve or activate it. The third is that what is happening right now, the synchronization, the acceleration, the institutional alarm, is the opening phase of first contact. One of these is our reality. There is no middle ground. The clock is running. If this changes your understanding of where we stand, subscribe now. Share this story is not finished. It is barely beginning. I will be back with updates as they develop. Stay alert. Stay alert.